Good evening and welcome to tonight's Diversity Matters panel conversation as we discuss our upbringings, our diversity efforts with our host and moderator, Reverend Vicki L. Hughes.
Good evening. Welcome to Diversity Matters. And this is actually our sixth conversation, our sixth Wednesday night live stream video. I would like to start with a quick quote. And this is a quote from Mary Frances Winters, and her book is called Inclusion Starts with I. She is actually one of my friends, one of my Spelman sisters' mothers, and Mary Frances Winters has worked in the field of diversity and inclusion for 30 plus years. So again, this is a quote from her book, and it reads like this: "The prejudices of ignorance are more easily removed than the prejudices of interest. The first are blindly adopted, the second willfully preferred." And let's see, I guess that's from George Bancroft, a 20th century American character actor. So again, that is from Mary Frances Winters' book, Inclusion Starts with I. During our first dialogue of Diversity Matters, which actually occurred on June 17th, some of us shared childhood experiences and or family views about race and other issues. And tonight, we're going to continue, talking about that as well as some other things. The topic for tonight is kind of a long one, and it has a question with it: our past upbringings and our distant or recent experiences, emotions. How do these things affect our daily interactions and current engagement in diversity efforts, if any, if we engage in any diversity efforts? Tonight I want to delve really deep into this topic. And, the question, how do our upbringings, experiences affect us, any of us, not just the people on this panel and my guest panelists tonight, myself, but how do these things affect us to the point where engaging in diversity efforts at work, at church, at events, out in the community or wherever is uncomfortable and unfamiliar? How do our upbringings and experiences affect how we deal with people, whether negatively or positively, and how can we overcome our ingrained mentalities? The things that we would like for you all to learn tonight are these. There are two. One is ways that your upbringing and past experiences might be hindering you from reaching out to others different from you, or those things, your upbringing and past experiences, how they might cause you to hurt or harm others. The second thing we'd like for you to learn is ways to, or reasons to overcome your biases and treat people fairly. So let's get started. We all know people who hate other people or groups of people who have different skin color, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, religion, etc., and they're not willing to get to know other people. And that's actually to their disadvantage. Sometimes they treat people poorly. Diversity efforts happen when we're willing to reach out to others different from us. What occurrences, experiences, and or upbringings bring a person or group of people to shy away from or purposely avoid certain groups of people? Well, we're going to talk about those things. I want to throw out one question. This is one of my guest panelists tonight, and her name is Quinn Scarvey, and she is actually she was a teacher, and now she is an ESL, English as a Second Language director at a school in North Carolina. So Quinn, my first question is to you. I want to ask you, as a Caucasian female, when you were growing up, did your parents talk to you at all about race? And if so, what was said? Make sure you unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah, I've got this. The Zoom, that's my daily.
Okay.
So thank you so much for calling on me to be here, Vicki. So Growing up, I don't recall my parents explicitly talking to me about race. However, I attended Overton Elementary School here in Salisbury, which has a very diverse student body, and did then. So I had very diverse peers and a very diverse group of friends at that. So I was actually just talking about this with my mother earlier today. And I think that she at times wishes now that she had been more intentional, possibly about talking about those things when I was younger, but it was really just naturally a part of my life, and my experiences growing up.
Okay. And everybody, just so everybody knows, I actually met Quinn when I lived in North Carolina. I was in seminary at the time, and I'd gone to this restaurant. She was at the same restaurant, and neither of us could get a table, individually. So we ended up sitting at the breakfast counter, and we struck up a conversation, and we've been friends ever since. A Black woman and a white woman became friends at a restaurant. So I just wanted to mention that. So, okay, I want to ask, let me ask my other guest panelists tonight the same question. Let me call on Reverend Johnny Sellers, and he is actually with JMS Ministries. He's an ordained minister. So let me repeat the question. Did your parents, as a Black male, did your parents talk to you about race when you were growing up, and what was said? Quinn, I believe Quinn grew up in North Carolina, and then you grew up in South Carolina. So what did your parents have to say about race?
Well, Vicki, thank you for having me on. And to answer that question openly, yes, my parents did talk to us about race. Being that the town I grew up in Bennettsville, South Carolina, Marlborough County was a racist area. We're talking about the Klan March until 1995, 96. And my family was in the fight for rights to be able to, my father was the first African-American fireman. My grandfather was the first Black man to own a store on Main Street. So for me, race was something to talk about. My mother more so talked about it to my brother and I in order to pretty much keep us alive.
Okay, that makes sense.
Can I tell my story, Vicki?
Sure, go ahead.
The reason I think my story is interesting is because if you've listened before, I've talked about being biracial. When I was born, I wasn't going to be able to be adopted because transracial adoption was illegal. And so I was adopted within the family. So my aunt and her husband adopted me, my biological aunt and her husband. And they raised me as if I never called her aunt. She was always my mom. But I was adopted in Ohio, and we relocated to California specifically because my parents didn't want me and then my sisters, who were also biracial, but they were Pacific Islander and white, to have to deal with racism. So we lived in California, and I really didn't encounter racism as a negative until I got to college because they kind of protected me. But one thing I'm always grateful to them is they didn't pass me. I mean, you can look at me, I've got red hair, I've got green eyes, I'm very fair. They could have passed me. They could have, they could have raised me to be white. Nobody would have ever known, but they never did. From the time I was very little, I've always known that I was biracial. I always was raised to be proud of my ancestry to the limit that they could, because they were, Midwestern white people. So they were limited in what they could do. My mom didn't know how to do my hair and, those kinds of things. But they made, if you know who John Amos is from the
Yes.
James Evans on Good Times, he's my godfather because they lived across the street. And in fact, his daughter and I are still best friends since we were 5. So, my parents made a point, not necessarily to have that conversation, but to just raise me in an environment where I was around people of all races. And because we were in California in the 70s, there wasn't any real negativity. There wasn't a lot of, where we were was relatively suburban, but it was very diverse. And it wasn't until I went to college, and I went to college under affirmative action, that it kind of smacked me in the face that this was a problem. So, from an upbringing standpoint, what happened to me is then I became super militant. Like I was like power to the people, Malcolm X. Like I was Sean King before Sean King was Sean King, right? So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And Vicky,
Okay.
just to say, even, and I like how you said that, Amy, because my family, even though we grew up in that area, my mother was Christian, so she took a different route, was love people, don't judge people till you learn people.
Right.
So when, and then at 44 now, you hear, you see, you make a decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see, Tangela. Okay, I have this is the question I wanted to draw out to you. I know this Black woman in her 30s. I actually work with this person, and we were in a conversation about something a couple of weeks ago, and she mentioned that she hates white people because of what they've done to Black people. So I wanted to ask you specifically, what advice would you have for her and other Blacks who say that this is someone who works in the healthcare industry, so she has to deal with white coworkers, bosses, patients, as well as Blacks and Latinas, whoever. So just what advice would you give her from a Caucasian female standpoint?
Ooh. I don't know that I would give her advice per se. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving advice because maybe there's something, really something deep that happened that we need to look at. I know that happens to people, and it's really sad when we see those life experiences that alter our judgment. Johnny said a minute ago, you see things, you hear things, and you make a decision. That's how we live our lives.
Absolutely.
I know for me, in my work as a hospice chaplain, I have never outright been declined by a family of another ethnicity. Like they've never actually said, no, we don't want you to care for us because you're white. But I have had people and families of colors who have not wanted me to care for them. Maybe they wanted a different chaplain who more fit their ethnicity. Maybe they have hurt, maybe they don't. I don't usually get to know because they don't usually share. But my goal in that situation is to always try to be a person of care and love. So maybe they have had a bad experience, but when they encounter me, I want to be a face of love that, maybe it says that some people are different and maybe it doesn't. But all I can do is speak for me. So that's what I try to do.
Yes. This person I know is, she's a healthcare worker. She's not in ministry. She's not a chaplain. And so, we were both working, so I didn't have a chance to have a long conversation with her, but, I would like to ask her more about this because I'm wondering if she gives better care to Black people than she would other ethnicities. I don't know. When you were talking about patients requesting certain, certain chaplains, that's never happened to me where I've been turned away, but I know some Black chaplains who I knew in seminary who, that has actually happened to them before. So I can definitely relate to what you were saying. So, okay. All right. This is for, let's see. I think Eliezer is the only one who hasn't talked yet. When you were growing up, let me go back to the race question, the conversation about race. When you are a Mexican American. When you were growing up, what did your parents tell you about race?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. I guess for me in my context and where I was raised up, if you know the backstory a little bit, my parents came over here to North Carolina, and they brought me over when I was 2 years old. And they decided to live in a town where there was no other Hispanics living there. So for us, I think for a long time there was. I mean, the population even now. I mean, I think it doesn't. We don't even have 1% of Hispanics here in this area, which is not the case in other areas in North Carolina. But I think for my parents and where we were living at the time, I don't even know if it was much a question about race, but really a question about survival. How do you survive in this new environment? How do you survive with people that's not your own, with people who don't speak your language, don't have the same customs, just totally different way of living, of understanding life. And so here's this kid, and you're going to send this kid in the middle of a bunch of white and black people in schools, and how does this kid survive that? And so, yeah, as you were asking that question, I was thinking back growing up. I remember one time my dad making a statement about my skin color and how it was, I don't know if the word in English would be beautiful, but it's something similar to that. Being brown, to be proud of that, to be proud of who I was. And I know at the time I probably didn't think about it, but it really meant something, because here I am in my 30s and it's ingrained in me. It's a memory that I have inside of me. My dad is no longer with us, but I still have that in me. And I think, man, it did have some kind of impact for me to be proud of who I was, of where I came from, no matter if nobody else in the room looked the way I looked, talked the way I talked, had the same ideas as they did. To be proud that I am Mexican, that I am really different. I mean, for me as a pastor, it's funny, we talk about cross-racial appointments. Any appointment that I have in the church is going to be a cross-racial appointment here in North Carolina. I'm either going to work with white people or black people, and that's going to be cross-racial. I mean,
right.
In the United Methodist Church, there are very few churches around here that are Hispanics, that are Latin American, and so yeah, I mean, that just has been kind of my upbringing. Again, it's not necessarily been about race, but it has been about how do we survive? How do we move forward? How do we get a foot holding in this on this side? And so it is for me, I would say it's a totally different experience and a totally different conversations that we have, because we're dealing now, I like to say, being a minority of minorities, which seems to be the case here in North Carolina. One thing, not necessarily in other states now, but here in North Carolina still seems to be the case. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You mentioned something about survival. So can you or anyone else talk about that survival when you are maybe the only one or one of a few?
Absolutely. I can attest to survival. especially here in Milwaukee, where there is a large racial divide. There's a large chasm of socioeconomic status when it comes to African American people. Um, going to private school, living in a suburb, removed from people that looked like me, for the opportunities that my parents wanted for my sister and I, it was really difficult. I mean, we were the only Black family, I think, in the subdivision of something like 70 or 80 homes, and for a long time. And then people would move in and they wouldn't stay long, and they'd move out, and it would be hard to connect and make friends. There's a story about when I was in fourth grade. I was the only Black boy in my grade, and South African brewery had bought Miller, and my teachers told us, okay, we're going to have a new student. His name is Andrew, and he comes from South Africa, and everyone is to write him a letter. Well, in my fourth grade mind, a South African was a Black person. So I wrote a letter to Andrew about how excited I was to have another Black boy in class, and how I couldn't wait to meet him and to be his friend. And Andrew showed up the first day of spring semester, and I was very surprised. Now, Andrew is one of my dear friends now to this day. That was, 20 years ago now. But being the only one in the grade, nobody prepared me and said, listen, maybe we need to talk about this. There are African people and there are Afrikaans people, and there's such a thing as a white South African, and this is what they look like, and this is how they sound. Nobody prepared me for that. But Andrew's family was incredibly gracious. In fact, there's a picture of Andrew and I with my arm around his neck, and the letter has been framed, and they hung it up on the wall at their home because they felt that I was so welcoming. But I really didn't know. So when you're the only one, it's hard to you go off of just what you know. You don't have any other frame of reference, so you just say, oh, of course he's from Africa, so he's going to be a Black person. Nobody had talked to me about the differences in races and creeds in Africa. No one prepared me for being pulled over in Mequon, and being asked, well, why are you driving down the street? It's like, well, my parents pay for that house over there. So, or being pulled over going to school, or being failed for my driver's test because of what I was wearing. I went to my driver's test in my high school uniform, which was a blazer and a white shirt and khaki pants, and being oh, you think you're too good because you're the only one out there. You think you're better than us being out there. Well, we'll show you something. So you learn the hard way each time when you are isolated and you don't have those resources.
Absolutely. Okay, in a few minutes, I'm going to switch to racial trauma. But before that, I just wanted to see if anyone wanted to comment about their ethnicity and just affirmation and self-love regarding their ethnicity.
I mean, my situation is so unique because I really do live in both worlds. I can, when I first got my job, when I came here, the woman who was interviewing me was like, oh, is there crime in Colorado? And I said, no, not really. She's like, well, there's a lot of crime here. It's all Black on Black crime. And in my head, I was like, this woman has no idea who I am and has no idea that my father is Black and that my daughter is Black. And, as far as I am concerned, I am a Black woman, whether people view me that way or not. So for me, it's very different because I can be in a situation of all white people and they don't pay me any mind. They don't notice me, Now, it's interesting because Black people always can keep game with me. Black people always will be like, something's up, right? And most of them will be like, oh, I have a cousin that looks just like you. You know what I mean? So for the most part, I can walk in a black situation and I don't feel as if I'm a white person in a black situation. I do feel like I'm a black person in a white situation, but they just don't know it, right?
Right.
I've never intentionally passed. I've never made that an intention, but trust and believe, when I've been in a car and somebody's been pulled over, I'll be the one who jump up and say, here's my ID. I have definitely used my appearance to benefit the browner skinned people around me, because I know how society works. And so, I feel like my situation is always unique in that, because I've never had overt racism directed at me. I have witnessed it, and I have been a party to, I've been in a situation, and I usually end up being the one to say something, but I don't think that I've really had to experience life the same as the white women on this panel or the black people on this panel. And I think that kind of gives me a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I forgot, I haven't, for those who are just joining us and haven't watched other segments that we've done over the weeks, just a little about my background. I actually was raised in a Midwestern suburb in a predominantly white environment. And then I went straight from there, after graduating from high school, went straight to a historically black college, Spelman College in Atlanta. So I've kind of been in both worlds and know how to navigate in both. I haven't really experienced blatant racism at this point in my life, but there have been some things, mostly just at work, where I feel like I've been treated differently, but nothing has been blatant. So I think I've been fortunate in that way. I think everyone has had a chance to talk. So I want to switch gears, and Bennett needs to get off in about 30 minutes. And I definitely want to get his input on the next thing that we're going to talk about. He actually lives in the city of Milwaukee, and that is about 30 to 45 minutes from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We all have heard on the news or from social media or wherever you heard about it, a man named Jacob Blake. There was an incident with him this past weekend on Sunday, and he was shot numerous times in the back, and he is now paralyzed from the waist down. Three of his children, I believe he has 4 children, but 3 of his young children, ages 8, 5, and 3, were in the back seat of the car when he was getting back in his car when he was shot by a white officer, shot about 8 times, and he's still in the hospital now. So that's a little background. But again, Bennett lives near that area. So I just wanted to first, I have 2, I guess I should have said Jacob Blake is a black male. So I have 2 black males on here tonight. I wanted to hear from Bennett and from Reverend Johnny Sellers first. Let Bennett talk and then Johnny. And then, let's engage in dialogue, because it's a tragic situation and there were kids who witnessed this. And I think about what they're thinking and how what mentality they're going to grow up with. So let's talk.
Yeah.
Bennett?
So as with anything that happens within these situations, the video is disseminated everywhere, and I have stopped watching videos, because when I watch those videos, and I think I've said this before, I see myself as a black man. Absolutely. And I wonder every time it's like, okay, if that was me, what would be said, what would be done, what picture would they use on the news, what would they, not that I have much of a past, but what would they pull out to try and say that I was not a God-fearing person, or that I didn't love my parents, or that I didn't love my partner, or that I didn't care for my grandparents. What would they try and do to disparage me? So I broke my rule this time, and I watched it, and I'm not happy I broke my rule. It's devastating. Especially thinking that the 3 kids were in the back of the car. It's devastating regardless. But you know, I was 5 years old when I was on the phone with my father, and my father had a car accident. And I think about that. I could hear the metal crunch. And I think about that now. And I can't imagine what it would be like to see my father get shot 7 times in front of me that young. There's going to be a lot of trauma. There's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of things that may stem from this that the children don't understand why, and we might not have explanation for it. This is where I think that
Oops. I think
Oh,
your
he
screen froze.
Is the screen
Bennett,
froze?
you still there?
Yeah.
Bennett?
I don't know if that man, I don't know if he's going to, I don't know how stable he's going to be going forward, but I hope that we hear his story. I hope that we're able to find out what is going on for him, what is going on for his family, and that his family gets the support and the care that is necessary. There was a press conference just before we got on this evening, and the Wisconsin Attorney General did put out some facts about what was going on. It is true that Mr. Blake had had a warrant. It is true that there was possibly a knife, it is true that there was a knife, but it's not certain where that knife was, what happened. I'm saying all of this to say none of that matters. It was still, it's still this man's life. The value of human life is what's at stake here. And, there were 2 people shot and killed last night and another person injured by this young man who, it seems like kind of a rogue, seems like an outsider. Some of the things that they typically say about about shooters, but in this moment I am struggling with being benevolent. I'm struggling with saying, okay, this young man that came out last night with a gun, he's been indoctrinated by his family probably to dislike Black people and dislike Mexicans, and he thinks that he has a right to go out into the street with a gun and point it at people and shoot people. And I'm struggling with the idea that he may also be a victim too. I'm trying to use the education that I've gotten from my grandfather as a minister and some of the education that I've had growing up. But it's hard when you see so much death and it could be me. It could be me. So it's frightening. And I stand with the protesters in Kenosha. I stand with those that are upset and hurt and don't know what to do. I think that looting is the symptom, not the cause. I think that I don't agree with it, but there's not anything that we can loot that has not been taken from us already. I mean, we have been here for 401 years, and we have been everything has been taken from us. We've been stripped down to the bone and then built to build this country. So I don't agree with looting. I think that protesting is all right. However, if this is what it takes to get people to understand that we built this and we are hurt and we are tired and we're not taking it anymore, then burn it.
I'm not sure if you saw, Sean King just posted a video probably like 2 hours ago that showed Ryan, whatever the kid's name is that did the shooting, showed him with police officers walking. The police officers gave him and his friends water. He had his gun, was walking with his gun, and you can hear the police over the radio saying, thanks, we really appreciate you guys coming out.
And
So
that's the despicable part.
yeah, so he
Right.
wasn't a rogue. He wasn't, you know, though the white supremacists came out specifically. And the other thing too is that in the very beginning, after George Floyd, there was some looting. I have not seen any looting on any video since then. Like all these protests, yes, the protests have gotten violent, but they usually get violent because the cops come and the cops throw tear gas, or they pick up the you know, there was that one woman that they snatched up and put her in a car and everybody was trying to protect her. But I haven't seen, so you know, people talk about fake media. I don't think there's fake media. I think that there's opinion media and there's journalism, right? And so, yeah, you have on CNN or on Fox, or whatever, you have the opinion shows and they tell what they think and they sway people. But then there's also factual journalism. And I think that when you look at the factual journalism, they're not talking about looters, but the American public have this idea of looters and violence and everything from protesting, because the opinion shows will show that. They'll show somebody breaking into Target, but that hasn't been happening. And so it's like, you know, all of the pundits and everybody who's, oh, no, you know, on the RNC the other day, they were talking about how it's okay to protest but not go to church and stuff like that. It's all to make us feel like the protesters are violent. And even in Seattle, when they were inhabiting the police station, they weren't being violent. They were just walking around. But let's say loot, let's say riot, let's put these dog whistle words out there so that people will think that there's this violence happening, and so then they'll send the SWAT teams in. I mean, I'm in Charlotte when they did the Black Lives Matter banner. There was a lot of protests. There wasn't any violence, and they were filming it. There was nobody being violent. People were just walking. People were arm in arm, and the cops came in riot gear with rubber bullets. With, you know, so that's where this violence is coming from. It's not coming from the protesters. It's coming from the police and the white supremacists. And I stand by that. I don't think the Black people are the problem.
And just quickly before I leave, I think to your point, Amy, about some of this idea of them whipping up the fear about looting and things. It's because America has become a society of consumers. There are more consumer goods inside of a Costco than there are in Afghanistan. We are in a country that values what you have, as far as things and how much junk you can amass and how many things you can put into your garage, rather than how many friends you can call on to come help you, who can come help you shovel your drive, who can make sure that, you know, grandma so-and-so gets to the supermarket or gets to her hair appointment or whatever. We are no longer a nation of people that look out for one another. And I think that goes for us being integrated, as well as Black people and as well as white people. We're all up trying to see how much stuff we can get and get more than the other person, and they're valuing the items that are inside of these buildings, these false idols, over the actual human life. And that's the sad part to me.
It really is. It really is.
So I thank you. Have a good evening, you guys.
Bye, Bennett.
Okay, good luck on your job, your new job tomorrow.
Thank you.
Many blessings to you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Of course. Have a good one, guys.
All right, take care. Okay, Johnny, Reverend Sellers.
Yes, yeah. So
I want to hear from you, the other Black male on here, and then I'm going to open it up to the other panelists as well, but I wanted to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so we just got over George Floyd not too long ago. So we watched a national lynching. Let's keep it 100. If you listen on the sound of my voice, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But me as an African American man, been on this earth 44 years, been discriminated against, called the N-word several times, had a gun in my back when I was a college student because of what I was driving, not knowing if I walk away from that or not. When I saw what just happened the other night, when we saw a young man get shot 7 times excessively in the back, I thought about myself immediately. I thought about Tamir Rice. I thought about Ahmaud Arbery. I thought about every African American man that has been shot. We hear, what about black on black crime? I'll say it again. What about white on white crime? What about Hispanic on Hispanic crime? I mean, I don't sugarcoat that at all. I do believe in praying, but being able to be prepared at the same time. And let's not walk around here blindly like racism does not exist. So Nikki Haley, racism does exist. We see it blindly and plainly that it does exist in this country. And it's existed 400 and, just like Benny said, 401 years ago from the time. But when I saw that the other night, it just took me back how my ancestors must have felt. Every time an African-American male get killed, whether it's killed by another brother or anything, or especially during cops, because getting killed by law enforcement is the new Jim Crow for us. It's the new Jim Crow. It's how, being that you can't openly lynch us from a tree now, you can lynch us by the gun. You can lynch us by the laws of a gun. Oh, he has a knife. Well, we don't know where he has a knife. Right? We didn't know where he had a knife was. But to lynch a man in front of his kids and not care, that's not Christian-like at all. That's evil. That's pure evil. To come behind that after the country is somewhat trying to heal from George Floyd, and now we have a Jacob Blake now situation. To come from that and then to go to this, to see that, especially on national TV, it rips at the soul of what we're trying to do here. It rips at the soul.
Absolutely.
You see the revolt when Nat Turner decided that, look, I can't preach slavery to my people anymore. They decided to cut the man's head off because he revolted. Now we're revolting in such a way where people are tired of this. Hey, let's be real. I go to church, I preach, but I'm an African-American man who's tired too, just like anybody else. And I hope that everybody else is tired. What do I tell my nephews? What do I tell my friends' sons? I don't have sons. I have all girls. So for me, it's even scarier because my girls, I have one in Virginia, one in Georgia. I'm talking to my kids about, do not, whatever you do, you don't fight. You comply, and I'm gonna get you out of jail. I'm gonna say everything I can, because I know that if you get stopped, they're not gonna give you a fast shot being an African-American woman. But being an African-American man is even scarier. So let's think about this. You talking about somebody like me who served my country. I've been to war. I've seen what war does to people. I've seen what trauma does to people. I've been in the Afghanistan, to Iraq. But to come back to my own home country, to have to fight for my own life and to fight for others' life years after year, and we see this going on, we have a big problem. And then I can't even say enough about, when we hear the rhetoric, Amy, I think you was talking about that for a minute, the rhetoric, when you hear mob, when you hear somebody saying mob, these mobs, you're trying to excite fear in American people and cause a reaction to American people. So what we saw last night over we saw what we saw with the RNC and some of this. And when you say mob, the mob is coming. Now you're trying to say, unfortunately, I got this word, I say mobbery. What happened in Tulsa, what happened in other places. Well, we didn't see a militia trying to stop what happened in Tulsa. When they burned down all of Greenwood in Tulsa and all of Wall Street, Black Wall Street, we didn't see no militia trying to be out there in the forefront trying to protect that. But now we see a militia trying to protect something. You mean to tell me the militia decided to give a 17-year-old kid, and let's go with it. And Illinois, first of all, Illinois, you're 17, you gotta be 18 to own a weapon in Illinois, who crossed the state line in Wisconsin. And then it's illegal in Wisconsin also, because you got to be 17 to own a weapon in Wisconsin. So you mean to tell me that means the parents probably need to be charged and the militia need to be charged for murder? What are we doing here in America? What are we doing? As an African-American man, Am I scared? Yeah. Am I prepared? Oh yeah, I'm prepared too. Because this, we have to be prayed up and we have to be prepared. Do we need to stand up? Protesting? Yes, we do need to be protesting. I think protesting is a way for the hurt people to have their voices heard in such a way. We've been protesting all our life since we've been in this country. We've been protesting for rights, for right to vote, for the right to go to school, for the right to have the same equal jobs. And I don't think protesting needs to stop. Am I for violence? No, I'm not for violence. No, I'm not for the rioting. I'm not for any of that. But whatever you do, you get a response from people. So right now, what we're seeing is a response of hurt people who've been hurt over years and 400 years or 400 years, 400 years. You talking about people coming here from Africa saying, I'd rather jump off the ship and die than to be under a slave master? Come on. And that's what you see here. You talking about some young people revolting, saying, before I become back under a slave master, I'd rather give my life marching in these streets and giving my life so that the next person under me, so that my kids, your grandkids, if you got grandkids, Amy, Tangela, everybody, that our kids can have the right to the tree of life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for your input, Sellers. Okay, Johnny. Quinn, let me see. What, so you, okay, so you're an ESL director. What would, so I guess you're doing doing your lessons on Zoom every day, virtually. So if any of your kids, you said you are a director of, it's K through 12. So if any of your older kids who are old enough to know what went on, if they saw the TV with the Jacob Blake situation, what would you, if your kids ask you about it, what would you say to them? How would you explain what has gone on, especially for someone, if some of the kids have just come to this country? How would you explain all this?
Thank you for that question. Working with students has taught me one very basic but very important thing. It is so important to listen. To first because if that child is expressing a concern, no matter if they're in kindergarten or 11th grade or anywhere in between, they need to let something out. And I think that goes for adults too. We should be quick to listen and not just let somebody speak, but soak up what they're saying. See what their fears are, what are their thoughts, what are their conceptions of what's going on, maybe even their misconceptions, but treat everything they say with fidelity and just know that that's part of who they are, their concerns and their fears, and then have that conversation after you take time to listen. And this is backing up a little bit in time, but I remember back before the last election, I had a little Latina girl come to me at school and say, Miss Scarvey, is it true that Donald Trump wants to send us back to Mexico? Am I going to have to leave? And at those times, I'm not going to lie to a child. I'm not, but I'm there to protect them.
Right.
So, sorry for kind of shifting gears there, but that line of being real with kids, but also showing them that my first job before I teach you anything is to protect you. And when you're here at school, I take that job very seriously. So just know that, yes, there's so much going on out there, but when you're in these four walls of this school, I want you to feel safe and feel valued and feel that you matter, because you do. So definitely with current times, it is so important to talk about what's going on and let those kids voice their concerns, because they know a lot more than many adults think they do. They hear a lot more than many adults think that they do. And just taking time to process that with them. And to be honest, another thing that many grown people don't realize is that these kids have ideas. They have thoughts about how to create healing and create love. And I mean, even small children, they can tell you, well, what if everybody would just talk about it? You know, and use their manners. Like, these are things that kids can teach us as adults. So I don't want to go off too long, but I hope that kind of addressed your question.
Yes, absolutely. And I was going to ask Tangela, since Tangela is not a teacher now, but she's a chaplain, but she was a teacher at one point, and she knows a lot about listening. We were trained that way as chaplains. So Tangela, would you like to add anything about that, listening to what kids have to say and try in a way to try to help them?
I think that Quinn hit it pretty good, that with children, as adults, we can really underestimate our children. Like Quinn said, you know, it's easy as people who are grown and who see ourselves as fully developed to look at children and say, oh, well, they don't know, or oh, well, they don't understand, or they can't see the whole picture. And while those may be somewhat true, children can see and understand more than we give them credit for, as Quinn said. And they do have ideas, as she said. You know, some of the smartest things come from young children sometimes. Like she said about, you know, well, what if people like actually listen to each other? Like, oh, well, what if, you know? I mean, so yeah.
Right. Okay. let's see, is Eliezer still on? Yes. Okay. Eliezer, I wanted to ask you something. You're the only, let's see. Yes, I think you're the only pastor on right now, since Reverend Jones wasn't able to get on. So Reverend Partita, my question to you is this: if kids like those of Jacob Blake, George Floyd, and others who have either witnessed these racial traumas or just, you know, have been the victims of them when their loved one died or has been severely injured or affected, what would you tell these kids if they have bitterness in their hearts and minds about, you know, other ethnicities, white males or whoever they have these this bitterness towards? What would you tell them if you had a chance to meet them and talk to them? From a, you know, I'm wanting you to talk from a pastoral standpoint, a Christian standpoint.
That is a really tough question.
Okay.
Because I would be sympathetic to what they're feeling, to what they're going through. And you don't want to know what I think, you know, is the solution to this problem. Because I come from countries where we match energies. I'll say that.
Where you do, repeat that?
Energies.
Match energies.
Yes.
Oh, match energies. Okay. Okay.
And I think for too long, we, you know, the people here for too long have played into this idea of this is the way you're supposed to do things. Mm-hmm. That's not how change happens.
Right.
If we're playing by their rule book. And so something totally different has to take place. But just from a pastoral perspective at a localized area, if somebody comes to me and they're dealing with trauma, I think what these other people here on online have said, you know, it does start with listening. It does start with trying to understand what they're dealing with, what they're going through, what's going on, and to find healthy ways to get that energy out of them. What can you do to resolve this in their minds and what they're going through and what they're dealing with? I mean, what kind of activism, can you or we do together to bring some kind of resolution?
I wanted to say, Eliezer, when you say about match energy, one of the things that I've been watching is I think that it's almost like that's what they want, right? If you're a hunter and you go out and you see a sleeping bear, you keep poking it and poking it and poking it till it wakes up and it growls at you, so then you can justify shooting it, right? So I feel like that's what's happening. And that's, again, that goes back to the looting and the rioters, is that and I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist, right? But I also believe that there's a reality to a lot of the stuff that's underground. And I feel like whether it's our government, whether it's white supremacists, whoever they are, but they're trying, it's like, this should have stopped at Rodney King, right? So they know they're getting filmed. They know that they know that people have cameras. They had those cameras when he was on the other side of the car. So the guy who pulled his shirt and shot him, he knew he was being filmed. And at this point, they don't care. And I think it's because they are trying to instigate exactly that match of energies. Because as soon as we Black people rise up, and the allies that we have, right? Because there's a whole lot of allies, there's a whole lot of white people who would lock arms and march as well. But as soon as we rise up, and instead of because the looting is kids, right? I want to go get a free TV. I don't care about, my friends are protesting. I'm going to get a free TV, right? So that's what the looters are. But as soon as we rise up and we start bearing arms, like I think it's the I don't give a fuck people or whatever, there's these militia guys in Atlanta that are like in all black, and I feel like my future husband is among them because they're so badass. But
let me marry you.
Yes, but I'm not married. But when
let me be the one to marry.
But when they rise up and they've got their guns, right? So I feel like that is, especially in this administration, if we were under Obama or somebody else, I wouldn't think this, but under this administration, that man is itching to declare martial law. He is itching to be able to declare himself as the commander in chief, just like he tried to pull it in Seattle. He sent the federal troops and the states shut him down. Well, if the states start worrying and thinking that they're about to get attacked, this could really be the race war that the KKK has been itching for. So I feel like, as much as emotionally I want to match energy, what I think is going to be effective, and what was beautiful today, is the Milwaukee Bucks boycotted the playoffs. And
right.
You know what I mean? And so if you have every NFL team and every NBL, like the amount of money that goes through there, and then like we had the blackouts where we didn't shop. If we like legitimately start hitting them in their pockets, and the black dollar is an impactful dollar, but you add the white ally dollar, and you add the Latino dollar, and you add the Asian dollar, and you start, if the whole Democratic side of the liberal side of the world decided to stop shopping, if nobody went out for Black Friday, that's going to, because they care about money way more than they care about race. And I feel like, as much as I would love to buck up, I'm not going to grab a gun. I'm totally anti-weaponry. There won't be, I don't even like water guns. So I'm not, I might go out there with a machete, but that's not going to do a whole lot of good. And all it's going to do is end up getting me killed and my kid killed, right? And then they win. So I feel like that really the solution to this is to identify what they're doing and point it out and say, you know what, we see what you're doing. Right? It's all, I fear for my life. No, you were intentional in what you did. And now we're going to the defunding the police, right? It's not, we don't want police. It's that we don't want them to have all the pensions and all the money that they have, number one. Number two, you can prevent crime by investing in the community, but then also making them all carry personal insurance, right? So instead of the city having to pay the victims, because Jacob Blake's gonna get money, he's alive. So he's going to get paid, but he's going to get paid by the city of Kenosha. He's not getting paid by that cop. That cop not only needs to go to jail, but his kids and his grandkids need to have to pay financially. And I think that that's when we'll start to see change, is when we start to actually hit them where it really hurts them. Because the black and white thing isn't hurting them.
Right.
I'm sorry. I didn't go to seminary and I was preaching. So.
Hey.
I agree with you, Amy.
And Amy,
It seemed to affect the pockets. But, okay,
Amy,
so Eliezer, did you want to say?
Johnny was going to ask me a question.
Well, I always say, until powerful white men ready to lose it all, this thing can never stop. It won't change. When they start losing it all and they're ready to lose it all, a lot of this will start changing over. A lot of when you see, like you're talking about, that when you start hitting it in the pockets and we have powerful white men losing it all, the game will start changing real quick.
Absolutely. I wanted to present a scenario, and anybody can answer this. This was, I believe Bennett mentioned it before he got off. Some people are going to say that, I'm talking about the person who shot Jacob Blake, or the officer who shot George Floyd. Any of them can say they experienced some trauma when they were growing up or something, and it affected them to the point where they did this action, this past Sunday or 3 months ago or whenever. And then we have this nickname for the Caucasian women who are calling the police on Black men, even though they haven't done anything. The nickname is Karen. I think there are a couple nicknames. Karen.
Karen's a good one.
Becky. Karen is the main one. Okay, yeah. So, what if a Karen was, let's say a Karen was in college years ago, a couple decades ago, and was raped by a Black man? Then that Karen is going to have this bias, this hatred towards Black men, period, because of her experience. And that's how she would justify doing something to a Black man today. I mean, what do y'all think about that?
I disagree with that too, because I think it's the same thing as saying black on black crime, and then nobody ever says white on white crime. White women get raped by white men, and they don't have a bias against white men. They have a bias against men. They might feel unsafe around men, but they don't say, oh, he's a white man, I'm afraid of him. And it's the same thing with the mass shooters. I mean, if we statistically look and objectively look, the people we should all be afraid of is a middle-aged white man who lives in his grandma's basement and owns an AK-47, because that's who's going to go and spray out a church or a movie theater or something else. But we don't fear that, right? The cops are afraid of the Jacob Blakes and the George Floyds, who aren't even doing anything. So I think that's part of the problem, is that systematically, and if you want to get real deep on it, you can start looking at slavery and the bucks that were, put to fight against each other, and that there was that whole fear of that. I mean, if you go Google Jimmy the Greek, he got canceled because he talked about the fact that on plantations they used to breed the biggest Black man and the biggest Black woman, and that's why Black people are such great athletes. He wasn't lying. That's not a falsity. It is the truth, but we don't want to ever deal with that. And I think that, this fear of a Black man that Public Enemy talked about is a very real, but very ridiculous thing, right? Because that's what all the Karens, well, when they killed their own kids, they'll be like, oh, a Black man did it. Well, of course, we're all going to believe that, because that's the narrative that is portrayed to everybody. And I think that, I don't know how that gets changed, but I think that that's part of the real problem, is we allow the woman in Central Park to call on the phone, oh, a Black man's going to get me, because the man told her to walk her dog, right? And 911's like, oh, a Black man's going to get you. Oh, hurry up. If she would have said a white guy was doing the exact same thing, oh, well, he's probably going to buy you a Starbucks. Like, that's the problem, is there's this stereotypical perception, and nobody's addressing that. It's allowed to perpetuate. I'm there. I gotta shut up. I'm so sorry, Vicky. I keep taking over.
No,
Okay.
I am going to agree with you 100% on that. And this is an African American man. I can't tell you how many times that I passed a white woman and she grabbed her purse or she grabbed her kids, and I've often said, turned around and said, look, I don't want your kids. I barely want my hyper kids, so I definitely don't want your kids. You know what I'm saying? I don't want your kids. I don't want your money. I don't want you like that. I'm just a black African American man walking down the street just like you. You don't have to clench your purse. You don't have to clench your kids. And we know when you do that what it is. What it's like. I can remember being on an interview one time, and these people said to me, it was in, I want to say Wisconsin. I think it was in Wisconsin. They said, it's cold. It's cold here and it snowed.
Oh, that was Wisconsin.
What you mean the cold and snow? But I already knew what you meant. You meant that African Americans don't like the cold, so it might not work well for me. That was the smartest thing in the room. And I can remember after it was over, the only African American woman in the room said, "You're not gonna get this job." She said, "You were the best person for a director that we could have for Health and Human Services, but you won't get this job because you're smarter than they are, and that's not gonna happen for you because you're smarter." We talked about a cost benefit analysis, and everybody went south because, unfortunately, I had a master's. Most of the people that was interviewing me didn't. So at that moment, I got discriminated against. I said, well, at this moment in my life, what I got to lose right now at this point? You know what? I'm gonna start putting white man on my job, Caucasian on my applications. Let's see how this turns out. Let's do an experiment because it may turn out a little bit different. Because the only time you're gonna know if I'm African American or white at that point is when you get me on this Zoom.
Right.
So, but it's so many times that we see brothers and sisters, especially brothers, especially African American. I'm not taking anything away from my sisters, especially African American women, but it's too many times that I've heard and I talk to young men about being discriminated against and what to do and how do you handle this as an African American man or African American woman. How do you handle discrimination when it's blatantly and right in your face and intentional in your face? But then you have I always say you can't tell, the oppressor cannot tell the oppressed how to protest. How you gonna tell me how to protest and you the oppressor? You can't tell me how to protest. There's no way you can tell me this. So now we have what you see, Amy, is you see people trying to tell us how to do this thing, we should just be quiet. We should just take what we're saying. We should just take the cops killing us. We should just take what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. We should just take that and walk and just be quiet and let it keep happening and we not say nothing. We don't have to, we shouldn't say anything. But no, the age I came up in, I like to say I'm the last of the civil rights baby. I was born in 1975. So
I was born in 66. You're not the last, buddy.
Okay, I'm not okay. Well,
I'm old.
We have to. We can't be silent anymore. Unfortunately, when we say our allies can't afford to be quiet in the background anymore in their homes. Which is something we can do? No, you got to be out front with us now. And we don't have those people like we had the Dr. Kings and some of these other people who are willing to put it all on the line, death and all. If it's caused death and all, we're willing to put it on the line and get out there.
Well, you had Colin Kaepernick, and look what happened to him. And that's, I think, I think that's the problem is it's there have been people who have stood up, and it's been a problem. Sean King stands up, and there was a whole entire Facebook group of cops that were plotting his murder.
And everything.
Yeah. And so I think people are, go ahead, Quinn. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, going back to those Karens, I think really what it's going to take is allies, other white women, to call out those Karens.
Yep.
Yes.
Because
That would be great.
that Tangela can do that. We need to be calling out those Karens.
I have a group of friends on Facebook. I don't know if any of them are watching, but I always say they're my favorite white women in the world because all of them are allies, and they bring stuff to my attention. But they are all. But what's interesting is a lot of them have biracial children, have biracial siblings, are in, one of my friends is Asian and her husband's white. So their wokeness is natural because of what they've been exposed to, but they are definitely trying to be more proactive. But we also, with COVID, it's hard to even be out there. You know what I mean? Like, people are protesting, but there's still a fear of that. And I just think that there needs to be a strategy that's not necessarily picking up a weapon, but is not sitting back and watching. You know what I mean? I think there's got to be something that's in between where we're not giving them the race war that they're looking for. We're not going to be that mob that they want to be able to pull SWAT out on, but sitting back and not doing nothing doesn't do anything. And I do think, this election is everything. This election is everything. And I don't know if people really understand it's not just conservative versus liberal. It is literally a dictatorship versus democracy, because if that man wins, and if he keeps the Senate, they will change the term limits, and he will, and especially if this racial stuff continues, he will use his law and order to declare martial law and bring in the National Guard on this. I don't think I'm exaggerating at all. And I think that that's the most important thing we all can do today for the next 90 days is to make sure that people are voting and people are out there, because Biden, and I don't even care if Biden's president, he's not even my first choice, but anybody but Trump, like, he has to win. And the other most important election is Amy McGrath, because she's going up against Mitch McConnell, and Mitch McConnell is equally as dangerous because he basically has blocked everything. The House can do whatever they want, and if Mitch McConnell doesn't want it to happen, it won't go to the Senate. And so I think that, a lot of people don't understand how the government works and how all of this transpires. And I think getting people educated about that, because if we don't get the Senate and we don't get the presidency away from where it is now, our whole life could go, because he literally could just bring in the National Guard and take us all out. And I think he would do that. He's that crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know I took you off topic again.
That's okay. We have about 9 or 10 more minutes. I wanted to ask Tangela something. I know we've talked about some of everything tonight, but I wanted to ask you, Tangela, I think it was during our first live on June 17th, or maybe the second one on July 1st, you stated that in your family, you have some people in your family who still display the Confederate flag and have a certain mentality. And so I wanted to ask you, you were on this diversity panel, you've actively participated before this. Before you became a chaplain, you were attending and graduated from a historically Black seminary. And so I wanted to find out, having grown up with your background, at what point did you say, I want to be different, or what made you want to venture out and have some diversity in your life and just explore other ethnicities?
Yeah. So when you asked me that question via text, initially I was like, I don't know. But I really sat with it and I tried to think about it. And I honestly think that there is a mentality that is fed to us that is received and pervasive in my family that I, for whatever reason, have never had. Maybe I could see through it. Maybe it was a gift. I don't know. But what I'm talking about is, I wouldn't say that my family was ever poor, but we were working class. And the working class is fed a narrative that certain people are against certain people. And that if you have something, then that means that I don't have something. And that puts me and you against each other, because I want mine and I don't want anybody taking mine. And instead of being told that there's actually plenty for everybody, we are fed this narrative of there's not enough and you have to get what is yours no matter what. And I think that has always been the problem. I feel like that was the problem in my family, and is still the problem for some people, is that they are in that mindset. They're in that mindset that this Black person down the street is taking something that should be mine, which I don't understand. Like, that just blows my mind, because I have always been of the opposite side of, well, why can't we both have? Why can't we both have good jobs? Why can't we both have money? Why can't we both have the dreams that we want? Why can't we both? Why are we? And I say the working class because I feel like this is most pervasive for those who have the less money. I feel like, I mean, the mindset is definitely in all classes. We definitely have rich people in power who have and spread the same narrative. But at least in my observations, I've seen it the most in our working class and our poor communities, because that's what they're fed. They're literally fed this idea to keep them against someone else. You know, if you don't get a job, it's because that person over there took that job from you.
Yeah, that's the affirmative action. The affirmative action percentages.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I've never felt that way. And, you know, like you said, I did go to a historically Black school, which was a big deal. Some people in my family didn't understand what that was about. But doing that, going to Hood, was so formational for me, because, you know, I think about the thing that's been pervasive for me through this conversation is I think about how when Eliezer was talking at the very beginning, he was talking about being taught how to survive. I never had to learn how to survive. I never had or have to think about how to survive, ever. Mm-hmm. And so that is a big deal for me. Now, so when I went to Hood, that was probably my only experience that I've had in my life where I was the lesser population. I'm not going to say minority because I don't particularly like that word, but, you know, I was the lesser population. I was the white person in the historically Black school. I was the one who got to sit down and listen to other people talk, other people who had things to say that I didn't know anything about. And I got to listen and learn from them. And doing that is why I continue to be in places like this, and not in places where certain people that I know are, where they sit and they're disappointed in their lives and they continue to point fingers at somebody who's taking something from them and never getting the chance to, or never seeing the fallacy in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Is it Eliezer? Are you still on? Eliezer?
He's away.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted him to talk about. You know, he was the only Latina at our seminary, so hopefully he'll come back. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Does anybody else have, let's see, Johnny, Quinn, let's see. Do y'all have anything else that you want to add right now? I was waiting for Eliezer to get back so you could say something at the end, but does anybody have anything to say? If he might come back, I'm not sure. He's still connected, so. Anybody?
All I have to say is vote.
Vote, okay. And I'm glad that, you know, Tangela, you know, she talked right after you, Amy. So, you know, she mentioned the term working class. So, you know, that's her background.
Well, I think the thing that was interesting too is what I said about the affirmative action, because when you talk to white people and they talk about affirmative action, they say, well, I didn't get a job because of affirmative action. Affirmative action, and this also goes to my background in diversity. Supplier
Come on now.
diversity, there was a target of 30% was high, 10%. We want you to spend 10% of your procurement dollars. You're a $10 billion company, 10% with minority women-owned businesses, and you can't do that. With affirmative action, we're going to have, out of 100 places available, we're going to give 5 of them to minority students. So if you as a white person didn't get in, it's because you weren't better than the 95 people that got in. It's got nothing to do with the five people that got in. Right. And I think that that's the thing is that exactly to Tangela's point about what they think that they're not getting, they're not realizing you're not even competing with these people. The percentages is so low, you're competing with it. So you're just not good enough. If you didn't get the job, it's because you just weren't good enough. It had nothing to do with the affirmative action.
Mhm.
You know what, Amy, thank you for explaining that on a large scale to everybody, because that, you know, I heard that so many times. Well, I didn't get there for affirmative action. No, you just weren't good enough because it's so low, you know.
Percentages are and like in supplier diversity, we were trying to get 10% and couldn't find enough suppliers to do the job. So it's like there weren't we were trying to give 10%, couldn't even find the people to do the 10% with. So how do you feel like you're losing contracts when you don't even have a competitor? You're losing contracts. We're not just, you know, the people still had to be good enough to get the contracts.
Right.
So yeah, I think
Right.
that there's definitely, to your point, Tangela, it's not just the middle class. I think everybody's raised to believe that Black people are going to come and steal stuff if they're smart or educated or whatever, and or they're just going to sit around and get welfare, even though statistically, you know, white people in Appalachia collect welfare far more than Black people anywhere.
Yeah.
And they also do
And-
more meth and more opioids.
You know, and the crazy part is, the only thing we're trying to do is we're trying to go to college, take care of our families, live a great life, honor God of whomever you serve in such a capacity, and just be able to provide for our families just like anybody else. But when you see when you strike down the Fair Housing Act and you kind of discriminate against me, that I can, if I can afford a $500 to $1 million home in this community now, and you can discriminate against me because color of my skin, because you think I bring crime, war, and all this to your community. I'm gonna bring a mob to your community, and now I can't even do that because now you can discriminate against me because of what you know what our current administration has done. You know, strike down then this Fair Housing Act. So we do need to get out and vote. I'm gonna rebuttal you, Amy, on this because voting is so imperative in this election.
It's our only hope. It's the only thing we've got.
Yeah, you know, we got to get out and vote. We got to be intentional participants in this voting election, and we have to take people to the polls. We have to be asking everybody, "You registered? Are you not? Let me get you registered," because it's amazing to me how many people are not registered to vote. It's amazing.
Or they don't believe their vote counts, or they don't think they need to.
Right.
I think we'll have better turnout than we did before, but a lot of people just assumed Hillary was going to win, so they didn't go. Right. And that was, or they just, you know, the Russian bots did their job and they really didn't like her and had all of these ideas of that she had done all these things that she hadn't done, you know. And Trump, if you've been watching the RNC, he's great at that. He'll, you know, one thing I point out to a friend, if you watch the Democrats, every single thing they accused him of, they can attribute. They can go and say, here's the video, here's the interview, here's the, you know, here's the person who witnessed it. Like they have all of those things. They can say he's going to do all these things and they have witnesses. All his people are like, Biden's going to increase your taxes and he's going to sell you to the Chinese. And they're like, and there's no attribution whatsoever. There's absolutely nothing that they can tie back to. Vicky has left. So are we done?
No, Vicky,
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Here.
I didn't know if I was like, did we wrap up and I missed it?
No,
but,
I was, Eliezer sent me a text, so he isn't feeling well. So he, even though it shows he's still connected, but he's off, I guess. So.
Oh, okay.
Hey, so.
Well,
Okay.
that's a good point to stop. I'll just be quiet.
Yeah, and we have to find a way.
I can just do this whole thing by myself. I can just give me a topic.
Oh gosh. Okay, so so we're wrapping up in a few minutes. So I wanted if I could get Johnny to say something quickly about what would you say to someone, to a white person, whether female or male, about their fear of a Black male? Just some advice or whatever you want to say about it.
Open your heart up so
Okay.
that God can operate on your main chamber. So when God operates on your heart about what you think about a person, he moves it to your mind and he moves you to act in such a way where you will want to get to know a person before you make a judgment. So open your heart, open your mind, and act.
Okay. Quinn, let me ask you something. We're wrapping up here. Let's see. What would you say to another white person about who you have seen as or you have determined is, you feel like that person is prejudiced? What would you say to that person about getting over their feelings and getting to know people of other ethnicities? What would your advice be?
I would tell them that everybody deserves a blank slate. When you meet somebody, you don't know anything about their story. You don't know their heart. You don't know where they've been or where they're going. So leave your baggage at the door and start on page 1.
Okay. Tangela, I'm going to ask you the same question. What would you tell another white person about overcoming their prejudice, their biases?
What I would tell them is I would first, invite them. I think I'd start the conversation inviting them to realize that they have biases, because some people can't take that step to realize that they have biases. But also I would, kind of like Quinn said, I would encourage them to see people as people. We talked about people who may have situations where something happened to them and that may be influencing their bias. That may be part of what's going on. But and if that is a situation, maybe that's helping someone get the help that they need to deal with that, because we don't want to write off that trauma, but to recognize that all people are worthy of love. If I was working with someone who was of faith, I would remind them that all of us are God's children. God loves all of us, and that God commanded us to love each other. So maybe we could do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be a great thing. Let's see. Is Amy still on? Oh.
I am.
Okay, we're about to wrap up. So, okay, so I'm going to ask you, as an interracial person, what would you tell other interracial individuals, no matter what, what their ethnicities are that makes them interracial? What would you tell them about, what advice would you give them about helping other people to, get involved with diversity and inclusion?
That's a hard one, because especially with Black and white biracial people, usually it's visual, right? So a lot of mixed babies look Black, and as far as people are concerned, they're Black, right? If you have brown skin, brown hair, brown eyes, you're Black. I'm unique in how I look, and the kids that are more fair typically end up passing. So it's not like there's really not a lot of middle road people. Most biracial children, especially if they have a Black parent in the home, they consider themselves Black. They operate under the Black umbrella. They're on that team, right? So I think it's the thing I would tell other people who look like me I hope that they're not trying to pass, because I think that's horrible. And I think that they should do what I do. You know what I mean? Like, I definitely act as a mediator, and I can walk into a situation, and you know, I had a racial class in college, and that's what I did. Like, none of the black people would talk to the white people, none of the white people would talk to black people, but everybody would talk to me. And so I feel like that's, you know, as a biracial person, that's your job, is to be able, even if it's between your mom and dad, to be able to say, okay, this is what this person's saying, and this one's that person's saying, and being a mediator, to be able to kind of bridge that gap.
Okay. Okay, everyone, we started a little late tonight due to technical difficulties, so we've gone a little over. Apologize for that. It's about 10:10 p.m. I just want to give you one action item to do before we meet again. And let's see, today is August 26th, so we will be back on Wednesday, September 9th from 8:30 to 10 o'clock. Don't know the topic yet, but thank you for listening tonight. The action item is to, this is for viewers, watchers, ask yourself, each individual person, what might be holding you back from engaging in diversity efforts. And then I'm going to challenge you to discuss your feelings with 1 to 2 other people whom you feel comfortable with, whether those are a couple family members, your coworkers, or whomever, and just start talking about your feelings and what your biases are, your prejudices. And again, this is to try to get you to start having conversations and to try to engage in diversity efforts and get to know some other people. But first, start with people you're familiar with. Thank you all for watching. And we are signing off. This is Diversity Matters. We hope that you've learned a lot and that you will take some action and start conversations. Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.